Caleb Dawson, 67, lived by himself on his family's aging ranch in the parched outskirts of Garrison County, Texas. A former Marine who had served during the Gulf War, he'd spent years working the same land his grandfather had bought back in 1923. Time had taken its toll on both the property and the man. His wife, Helen, had died 5 years earlier from cancer. Their only son, now living in Seattle, was too wrapped up in his corporate life to visit more than once a year. The barn's roof sagged precariously, and the fence line required constant upkeep. Every season brought fresh obstacles his older body struggled to face. Caleb got by with a small herd of cattle, only 6 remained, and the vegetables he tended in the side yard. His Social Security barely covered the tax bill, and the drought had caused his water costs to skyrocket, but he held on, living frugally and repairing what he could himself. One Tuesday morning, while reading the local paper over his one daily cup of coffee, a short article drew his attention. Veteran's widow faces eviction after funeral expenses. The story told how Alicia Monroe, widow of recently fallen Staff Sergeant Jeff Monroe, was being forced from her home after using their savings to pay for his burial. The bank had issued a 30-day notice for her and her 2 kids to leave. The name hit Caleb like a gut punch, Jeff Monroe. They had crossed paths during their service in Fallujah, different outfits, but Caleb recalled the young sergeant who had helped carry the wounded during a vicious firefight. They never met again after the war, but some names you didn't forget. That afternoon, Caleb climbed into his 20-year-old pickup and drove to the First National Bank in town. He withdrew the full amount of his savings, $18,742.33, and requested the teller issue a cashier's check made out to Alicia Monroe. "Sir," the teller paused, "this is your entire balance. Are you absolutely sure?" Caleb gave a single nod. "I am." Standing behind him, local rancher Dwayne Mercer, whose multiple offers to purchase Caleb's property had always been turned down, let out a noticeable snort. "Look at Dawson trying to play the hero," he muttered to the man beside him. "Guy can't even keep his own fences together, but he's out here tossing around cash like he's some kind of Rockefeller." Caleb paid no attention to the remark, tucking the receipt into his coat pocket as the teller completed the paperwork. That evening, his neighbor Frank dropped by, troubled by the news of Caleb's large withdrawal. "You've lost it, Caleb. No one was there when Helen got sick. Nobody helped out when your well dried up last summer. Why throw it all away for people you don't even know?" Caleb looked up from the envelope he was addressing. "Anyone who wore the uniform, I don't leave them behind. Not back then, not today." "That was war," Frank argued. "This is real life." "Same thing sometimes," Caleb answered softly, pressing the envelope closed with his calloused hand. "If you believe a good man should be remembered, then stay." Early the next morning, Caleb discovered an official notice affixed to his front door. The bank had begun foreclosure proceedings after 3 months of missed mortgage payments. He now had 30 days to catch up or leave the premises. The timing was no accident. In small towns, news spreads fast, and his large withdrawal had prompted the bank to examine his file right away instead of sticking to their usual warnings. At the feed store, where he'd hoped to buy chicken feed on credit until his next Social Security deposit, the owner gave him a sorrowful shake of the head. "Sorry, Caleb. We're tightening up accounts. Cash only now." The man avoided Caleb's gaze. "Might want to check with the county assistant's office." Empty-handed, Caleb headed back to his truck, only to hear Dwayne Mercer calling from across the road. "My offer's still open, Dawson. I'll even let you crash in the guest house. Charity for charity, right?" His friends laughed heartily at the remark. That afternoon, Caleb went to the local Veterans Affairs office, hoping they had emergency support programs. The place was packed, underfunded, and deeply disheartening. After waiting over 2 hours, a rushed and weary caseworker, the worker finally spoke his name. "Mr. Dawson, I've gone over your file," she said, glancing briefly at her monitor. "Sadly, you don't meet the criteria for emergency housing aid. Your property value goes beyond the allowable limit, even factoring in the mortgage still owed." "I'm not asking for housing," Caleb clarified, "just enough to keep the animals fed till next month." The woman let out a sigh, her expression softening slightly. Off the record, this system helps the ones who get media coverage, the stories that explode online. A Korean War veteran with no internet presence. It's not fair, but that's how resources are divvied up these days. Caleb gave a small nod. He'd never owned a computer, never cared for the web. His world was physical, earth and animals, weather and labor. That evening, he ate his final can of beans with a dry slice of bread at his modest kitchen table. He penned a letter to his son, explaining his choices without asking for help. At the bottom, he wrote, "No one should pass alone or live without someone believing in them." He left out the foreclosure letter. As the clock neared midnight, a faint knock startled Caleb. Few people ever visited, and certainly not this late. Cautiously, he opened the door to find a woman standing in the shadows, mid-30s, alert and upright like someone with military training, though dressed in civilian clothes. "Mr. Dawson, I can't stay," she said, handing him an envelope. "We can't make this public yet, but you should know. You're not in this by yourself." Before he could say a word, she vanished into the night, the distant sound of a car starting up, then fading away. Inside the envelope was a plain note. "What you did for Alicia Monroe hasn't gone unnoticed. Stand by." No name, just typed on simple paper. No logo, no identification. Caleb laid the note on his kitchen table, unsure what to think. His instincts warned him not to trust in empty hope. But there was something about her presence that had felt legitimate, deliberate. That night, he slept uneasily, torn between wondering if he'd made a grave mistake or the most important decision of his life. Either way, the ranch he'd devoted decades to would likely change hands before the month ended. Type unfair if you've ever seen someone do the right thing and pay the price for it. The first faint light of morning touched the barn's roof when Caleb heard the vehicles arriving. Not the familiar clatter of farm pickups, but the low, powerful purr of tuned engines. He stepped onto the porch, coffee cup in hand, and watched as 11 identical black SUVs, government-grade yet lacking plates, pulled up his long dirt drive, forming a perfect row. For a few seconds, there was stillness. Then, in coordinated fashion, the driver's side doors all opened. Men and women stepped out in military dress, Army, Navy, Marines, Air Force, lining up in formation. From the lead vehicle, a tall man with silver hair and a major general's insignia approached, offering a crisp salute, a gesture that felt oddly formal, directed at an older rancher in worn jeans and a faded shirt. "Mr. Caleb Dawson, I'm Major General James Marvin, Department of Defense, Special Operations Division. On behalf of the U.S. military, I want to express our deepest thanks for your recent actions." Caleb reflexively returned the salute, the motion ingrained through decades of training. "I don't understand, General. What's this about?" "The Monroe family, sir," the general said, posture rigid. "What you considered an act of simple kindness was, in truth, a vital step in a matter of national security." From another SUV, a woman dressed in civilian clothing approached, carrying a leather portfolio. "Staff Sergeant Jeff Monroe," she began, opening the folder to reveal documents labeled with security classifications. "Wasn't just an ordinary Marine. He was a critical operative in Operation Baltic Shield, a counterintelligence initiative aimed at extremist cells with global ties. After receiving a terminal diagnosis, Sergeant Monroe gave key testimony that led to the takedown of 3 terrorist funding operations. Since that time, his family has been under our protection via the Witness Security Program." Caleb stood in silence, trying to absorb what he was hearing. He had believed he was simply assisting a fellow veteran's widow. "Your financial support," General Marvin continued, "spared Mrs. Monroe from needing to contact local aid groups, something that would have created a digital footprint and possibly jeopardized their protected identity. Your help effectively preserved their cover at a pivotal moment." "I didn't know any of this," Caleb replied sincerely. "I just saw someone who needed a hand." "That's exactly what makes your actions so exceptional, Mr. Dawson," the general said, his tone softening. "You acted solely out of principle, without any thought of praise or gain." Another officer stepped forward, carrying a small wooden case. "The Secretary of Defense has authorized me to present you with the Civilian Distinguished Service Medal our highest award for a civilian. It's given only in rare instances and never without serious consideration. The officer opened the case, revealing the medal on a blue ribbon. Caleb stared at it, overwhelmed, as they fastened it to his weathered shirt. General Marvin handed him a formal certificate, embossed in gold and bearing several signatures. In addition, he said, the mortgage on your land has been fully settled. How's that even possible? Caleb asked. The Service Members Civil Relief Foundation has officially recognized your ranch as a heritage site of military relevance, the general explained. They've acquired and canceled your outstanding debt, deeming it a matter of national interest. By late morning, military engineers and construction crews were surveying the land. A Marine unit had already started fixing the sagging roof on the barn, while members of the Army Corps of Engineers assessed the well system and perimeter fencing. We're not here to change anything, a young lieutenant told Caleb as he observed the work. Just to preserve what you've made and ensure its ongoing use by direct order of the general. From the main road, curious locals had gathered to watch the stream of military trucks and workers in amazement. Dwayne Mercer stood among them, his earlier ridicule now replaced by speechless awe, the bank manager included. The individual who initiated the foreclosure showed up visibly uneasy, navigating past the military presence. A stern-faced JAG officer stopped him, pulling him aside for a private exchange that left the banker pale and nodding repeatedly. By the afternoon, news vans began appearing, though military police held them back at the property's edge. Mr. Dawson's privacy will be honored, was the sole statement issued. As dusk settled in, General Marvin found Caleb seated on his porch, still reeling from the day's developments. There's something else you should know, Marvin said, taking a seat next to him. Alicia Monroe received your check, but she didn't deposit it. She reached out to us right away. He passed Caleb an envelope. Inside was his original check, along with a handwritten note. Your generosity rescued us when we had nowhere to turn, but someone like you shouldn't lose their home for helping us keep ours. With heartfelt thanks, Alicia, Emma, and Michael Monroe. Have you ever done the right thing while everyone else turned away? Your story is important too. 1 month later, Caleb's ranch had undergone a transformation. The structures now stood upright and sturdy, repainted in the familiar hues he had always chosen. New fences bordered fields, where a modest group of cattle gifts from different military units grazed peacefully. All the work had been done with striking respect for the land's past. Nothing flashy or high-tech, just careful restoration that preserved the ranch's 100-year legacy. Even the squeaky old porch swing had been meticulously repaired rather than swapped out. Each morning, Caleb still rose before sunrise, brewing coffee in the same chipped pot. He'd sit on his porch and watch daylight spread across land his family had owned for generations. Land that would now stay his for the rest of his life. A new flagpole stood near the main entrance, placed there by a Special Forces major who'd insisted on pouring the concrete himself. Each morning, Caleb raised the American flag with the same precision he'd shown in service decades earlier. Occasionally, unmarked cars would slowly drive past, a quiet signal that his small gesture of respect had resonated through layers of national security he'd never imagined. Twice a month, a military chaplain happened to be nearby and dropped off groceries and updates. One Saturday morning, a young boy approached the fence line where Caleb was fixing a loose wire. He handed Caleb a handmade card with a child's sketch of a farm. My mom told me to give you this, the boy said. She said you're the first one who let my dad truly rest. Caleb recognized Alicia Monroe standing at a distance, her posture alert, but her face calm. She gave a single respectful nod before guiding her son back to their idling car. Some people grow older quietly in overlooked corners of the world, yet their deeds echo like far-off bugles across lives they never knew they reached. And some gifts, unspoken, unrewarded, leave behind only the quiet certainty that doing right is always noticed in time. Have you ever helped someone when no one else saw? Share your story, because silent generosity deserves to be honored. Subscribe for more powerful stories so what's right never fades into silence. You're giving away all your money to a stranger's family? Caleb didn't respond. His hand shook, but his eyes stayed firm. The bank teller stared at the check. The amount was everything. A mocking laugh came from behind. Guess he thinks he's some kind of hero. Caleb turned and walked away. And at sunrise, 11 black SUVs quietly lined his driveway. From each one, a uniformed figure stepped out and stood at attention. Type 1 if you believe genuine kindness never goes unnoticed.